Hello everybody and welcome to Plugin of the Week, our weekly broadcast live from the hub in our school in London. As you know the format, every week we show you a plugin that we feel you may want to try, may be useful for your production, for your mixing. It may be instruments, it may be mixing tools, and this week we want to look at what we call usually more of a utility plugin, and it's a metering plugin. The plugin is called Levels. Some of you may have heard of it. It's designed by Mastering the Mix and 29 Palms. So let's have a look at the screen and look at the interface of the plugin to start with. This is the home page of the plugins, which you can go back to by pressing Levels, and you can reset here. The one thing about this plugin, which is really great, is obviously it's all in an interface. Typically when you mix or mastering, I don't know about you, but personally I tend to have quite a wide range of metering plugin on my master channel. Sorry, I've got to work out my microphone better. So I tend to have a peak metering, I could have maybe a VU meter. Typically you would have a correlation meter for your left and, the phase relationship and your balance between left and right, checking if there's nothing in phase. I would have a plugin that allows me to listen in mono. The beauty of Levels is that it does all of that within one interface. So let's first start playing one mix here. I'm gonna make it a bit bigger here. So I've got it here on my master fader. The one thing to be aware in order to be able to read Levels properly and to make it work properly is you can set it up in the back end. So if you click on the little wheel here, it takes you to the settings. And they've made it quite in a nice way where you can select your setting, for example, whether you mix or you master. And then within that, you've got a set of settings that's going to change all those numbers here. So if you look at a balance mix, they've defined, obviously it's a matter of taste, but the peak threshold is at 6 dB for most of the, let's go through all the mixing preset. Yeah, they're all like 6 dB. So the idea behind it is that if you're going to send your mix for mastering or mastering it yourself, it's a good idea to leave a headroom of 6 dB. So leaving the mastering engineer to be able to play with the EQ, the compressor, and after that limiter. As soon as you boost your EQ, you're getting dBs, you're getting some volume. So the idea is to allow the mastering engineer to do more work freely. Again, 6 dB, if you master yourself, there's other ways you can go about it, but there's no harm in leaving 6 dB. So I'm going to leave it at that, and I'm still going to put it in loud. So loud changes the LUFS metering. So we'll go into those as well. So I'm going to set up for mixing at the moment on loud, because electronic music, has to be loud. I think it's part of the production value of it. So let me play the mix. Now, at the moment, let's go back to the settings. We've put it at 6 dB here. Yeah, let's leave it at 6 and let's see what it does. So I'm going to play the mix. And as you noticed, what's great about this interface, there's a really lovely kind of gain type of interface, simplistic interface, which I really like. If one of those 4 areas that this metering deals with, that displays to you, becomes red, that means this area needs your attention. So obviously going red in a headroom, what it means is that it exceeds my 6 dB headroom that I've set up here. So by how much is indicated by the peak here. So 1.3, you will notice in Logic that the peak metering in Logic doesn't always recreate, and actually here it's not at 0, so I'm going to put it at 0. So it says here that I'm picking at minus 0.13, which is probably not enough headroom before heading to mastering. Here on my Logic metering element it says 2.1, it's a bit slower. So that one is faster, that means it's catching up the quickest peak. So probably more accurate in the sense of checking your peaks, level of your peaks. Within that, you also have LUFS metering here. Still on the headroom. What LUFS means, it stands for loudness units relative to full scale. And it's been standardized in about 2011, I think, and it's probably the most accurate way of displaying perceived loudness. Until now, VU meters, RMS, were aimed to give us a sense of volume, but perceived loudness is very different. And LUFS is probably the most accurate way to perceive your loudness. And it has two sections, the shorts, and this one is on the longer, taken over more of an average. So here it gives us about -16 here on the shorts. So it's pretty healthy. On the loud mixing setup, it's recommended to go from 8 to 12. So we've got quite a margin, and that means we're really much in the safe environment here. So if you wanted to make that green, you would have to make sure you're going on the peak values here. So one way to do it in Logic is you can't really put your fader down because it's post plugins inserts. So one way would be, for example, a quick way would be to insert a gain plugin just before your leveling, before at the last of your chain, and if it goes -2.4, so we probably want to go, and then I'm going to reset. The moment my peaks are at, so that's pretty healthy, I would say. I mean, normally to do that, I would choose the loudest passage in my piece of music, obviously. So that's for headroom. Now, we also have another meter. More and more meters give you what we call the dynamic range, and the dynamic range is the difference between the peak and the lowest level, the throat, in your mix. So let's have a look at our dynamic range here. So again, in modern music, when you mix, the dynamic range is about, we say about 9. You could even argue that 9 is pretty good for, maybe for mastering. I mean, modern masters now go to 6, sometimes 3 dB dynamic range, and that's not enough, you know, that's when it's getting really, really squash. So 9 for mastering is pretty good, and for mastering it's still also both valid. So at the moment we're on 14 dB of dynamic range, so it's pretty cool. What makes the dynamic range, reduce the dynamic range, were typically compression and limiters. So I've just inserted a limiter here, and I'm going to crank it up crazy. And to be very conservative, actually, what I'm going to do, instead of not peaking, because there's a big difference between peaking and you could not peak and still be really low in your peak, therefore have a great headroom and have an absolutely terrible dynamic range. And for me, in order to demonstrate that, I'm going to bring those two faders together. That means I'm making it louder, but I'm compensated by the makeup gain as well here. So. Okay, it's not active, that's why. So let me redo that together. Okay, I think it's a good example. So you see here I am, let's reset it. I'm getting towards a 10 dB, 9 something dynamic range, starting borderline, it turns yellow. And let's bring it down a bit more. So now you see the attenuation, we're hitting 6 dB reduction on our limiter. And you see now we've gone under the dynamic 9 dB dynamic range, so we're getting it red. However, our headroom, you see the peak is -11, so there's plenty. So I think it's a good way to demonstrate the big difference between headroom and dynamic range. And obviously, if I was to push that again now, I'm getting my peaks, so I could still bring it within reason, but still my dynamic range is wrong. So I hope it helps you, and it's a really nice, lovely way to see those things happening together. So that's to cover the headroom and dynamic range. I'm going to close this project now. I'm going to bring another one here. I've got lots of few projects. Yeah, so I'm going to bring this one here. Here is a track which has massive phase problem. It was a track. It was an example taken from our mastering course when we teach students, you know, to start fine-tuning their ears and realize how out of phase sound. And sometimes with out of phase element, it's not always, when there are individual element in your out of phase, it's not always easy to notice them within the mix. So here we've put the entire mix out of phase, so it's going to be easier to be picked up. So let's put the meter here. I've put levels here, and you see straight away the stereo field. It's picking up the correlation phase issues that we're having, and as you can see, it's entirely, because the entire mix is out of phase, obviously. This is an extreme example that I wanted to show you. The correlation is shown between the +1 and -1, but here we are totally in the -1, so it's totally out of phase. That means if you go mono, you're going to be, it will all disappear. Another beautiful feature actually while we're in mono is actually this mono function here. Have a listen. Here, so some elements are really drastically out of phase, and here it allows you to listen to your mix on mono. So again, very useful. Let's say, for example, if I'm going to take this short example here. Let me close that window now. Make that a bit bigger. We've got a simple bit here, and again, quite drastic phase problem issues here. But again, allows you to check your mixes in mono. And one important thing when you check your mixes mono is to not only have one speaker, but also only play one side, both. So you really can get a full understanding of what's happening in mono, because this is often what you're going to hear in many clubs and sometimes in bars. So here you can only listen to the left hand side, or here to the right hand side in mono. So a great features when you're back on the home. So at the moment we've gone to stereo field here. We've done the dynamic range, we've got the headroom, and if you want to go back to the home, like I said, press levels and reset. Another one here, let's listen, I'm just going through some example really. I mean, this one is, obviously it shows -3 here, but it's really distorting, really distorting. And this track is clearly been mastered. So what we can do is we can go here and you put it on CD mastering. And you see now that the peak suddenly becomes -0.1, which is the kind of a standard. You should never leave it at 0. And there's a true peak as well, now selected on mastering. You could use true peak for mixing, but mostly it's used for mastering because the true peak shows you the kind of intersample happening when you're that close to 0. And typically, because of the converters, this is what happens with intersampling. Some of the very peak near 0 tends to go over because of the conversion, and that happens with your analog, digital to analog converters, but also when you turn a file into MP3, for example. So mastering for iTunes, for SoundCloud, for the internet in general. You should really be careful, because if you hit 0 very quickly with your true peak, let's see what it says here. Yeah, you see it's still showing, basically here it's showing -0.3, but in true peak, it says that we have very short samples that are peaking at 2.6 over 0, over the full scale. Those what happen tend to be squared off. That's what creates distortion. Obviously, that's the way the track has been mastered. There's nothing you can do. But typically, normally, what you should be doing is go below that. So something to be very aware of when you're mastering a track. So I'm going to bring that, it says 2.6. I'm going to bring it to 2.7 now. And I'm going to reset. Much more healthy. But you see the dynamic range, it's still, I mean, this track has been really hammered. I mean, let's look at the sine waves here. Let me zoom. I mean, that's what, you see the difference between the lowest level here and here. We're talking 6 dB dynamic range, according to our plugin here, 7. So we're probably getting borderline of too squashed in terms of, the loudness. And here it's not so much the perceived loudness, but it's just the dynamic range. Everything is there constantly and becomes quite tiring for the ears. If we go there to LUFS as well, I mean, you see here we're 9.7. I mean, it says that our loudness is okay. So the loudness is okay. If we turn the headroom here, the peaks is okay. It really is the dynamic range, which is a bit of a problem on this track. That's been too compressed. And again, here we're still getting some very short peak going over 0, so that would cause problem, especially once we turn it into MP3 and all that kind of stuff. So that is the kind of thing that this plugin does, and it's pretty cool. I've got another project somewhere. Let's try this project here. So that's much quieter project. Can I have more volume on this? Thank you very much. Yeah, and as you can see here, it's a much more conservative problem, and first appearance is pretty cool. We're not getting too much, nothing comes red, so that means we're probably somewhere in the right direction. You may remember that track, that was one with Declan did, that we've done a couple of sessions live with you guys on using that track. So we listen in mono, everything goes well. There's another thing that I would like to show you is this bass space. The idea of it, again, is not going to tell you much about masking and if you have, but it may help you a little bit to identify if you've got any sound clashing with your bass and kick. So as it says here, you need to mute your bass and kick before you start. So I'm going to mute, there's quite a bit of drums going on, so I'm going to turn that off, and the bass here. There's still a kick going on, yep. And now let's see what it says. And you see it shows you 4 range, 40, 80, 120 and 160 hertz. So it shows you typically if you had a sound that in this area could mask a little bit your bass, your kick, and therefore make them not as clear as they could be, and create that kind of muddiness and not very tight and precise low bottom end. I mean, as you can hear, the track is quite really well put together, so there's not really anything clashing in that, but maybe we can. Okay, I'm gonna take those. And let's put some EQ. I just want to see. There's probably not enough here, or maybe a bit here. Okay, I'm going a bit crazy, but just because I want to highlight. So straight away here, you see, I went crazy on I totally went crazy on the synth, the pad, the Juno chords, by boosting those. And it says, it's highlighted straight away by the plugin that everything that's going on around this area is really going to create problem. And if I start bringing after that my, let's put it on here. And again, I mean, I'm really going to reset it here. So one thing I'm noticing at times is that here, now that we have, although we know there's a problem, it doesn't always show when the entire mix is showing. It doesn't come on red here. So something to be aware, and I've noticed the same with the stereo phase, but actually it's every metering is like that. You know, sometimes you're going to have something really drastically out of phase, like a snare or a synth. And although in mono, when you put it in mono, you're going to hear it. Some metering plugin may show that it goes a little bit wider, but doesn't really come up as phase issue, you know, with a big red alarm with phase issue. So something to be aware of. Metering is never going to replace your ears, and you need to really hear. You need to really listen carefully to everything. And by checking in mono, it's a succession of steps that you can take to ensure that your mixes are better. But I think this metering package can really help you a little bit identify really pressing issues. It may not resolve every issue for you, and that's not the point. You know, you need to use your ears, but it may help you to identify those really glaring mistakes. And glaring mistakes are easily made nowadays. When you mix at home, you may not have the monitoring system that that allows you to hear everything what's going on at the bottom end. The room may not be treated properly, the standing waves and all that kind of stuff. So this is, I think it's a really great tool, and I can't wait to see updates. And I'm sure it's going to get better and better. But it's already really, for me, it's really interesting, and definitely going to be part of my master boss chain of plugins that from now on I will be using. So I think that's me for today. I hope you've enjoyed, discovering this plugin, and by all means go to Mastering the Mix on their website and download. There's a free trial for 14 days, so you can have a couple of weeks to try it and really see if it's something for you. I believe our students at Point Blank soon we will be able to offer educational discount on those plugins. And if you want more information about mixing and mastering, check our website at www.pointblankmusicschool.com. The mastering is part of our BA, both mastering and mixing are part of our BA that we teach here. We also teach those courses online, so check the website if you want more information. That's it for me for now. I wish you all a happy Friday and a great weekend. See you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.